What's up, Psychedelic Investors? My name's James, and you're watching The Psychedelic Investor, your number one news source for psychedelic stocks. Welcome today to what might just be our most controversial episode that we have ever done, and that is because we have news that not one, but two major insiders in MindMed have started offloading many of their shares. Of course, we are talking about the CEO of MindMed, JR Rahn, who recently sold a good chunk of his shares, and then he was followed up by a major investor and board member, Bruce Linton, who did the same. So in this episode, we're going to discuss how much they sold, potential reasons behind the sale, and as well as stated reasons behind the sale. And then, finally, what us retail investors should be doing about this. Should we all be running and panicking and going into the hills? Or should we take this in stride and just accept this as a normal part of the process for these upcoming medicine companies? So we're going to discuss all of that and more in this episode. But first, if you enjoyed this episode and you want to see more like it, invest in the channel with your like and subscribe. Over time, you'll see your investment grow as we continue to bring you the information that you need to know before investing in the psychedelic medicines field. Enjoy the episode. Hopping right into it. Last week, I believe on Wednesday, we got news that JR Rahn, CEO of MindMed, sold $24.7 million worth of his share, which amounted to about 38% of his total holdings in the company. So following this sale of almost $25 million, he still had 5.3 million options, 2 million RSUs, and an RSU is just a specific type of stock which has restrictions on when and how you can sell it. And then he also had 1.7 million subordinate voting shares left. So again, he sold $25 million, just under $25 million, which amounts to 38% of his total position. Now, before getting into some speculation for why he may have sold this, I think it's only fair to first give the stated reason why JR says that he sold these stocks. So right after the sale became public, a spokesperson for JR Rahn put out a statement, and I'm just going to go ahead and read that for you now. In this statement, which was tweeted out, they said, as per recent regulatory filings, MindMed CEO and co-founder JR Rahn sold a minority position of his overall holdings and equity compensation in MindMed. He remains one of the company's largest individual shareholders through both stock and long-term equity compensation plans. MindMed's mission is deeply personal to JR, and he plans to use a portion of the proceeds to establish the Clara L. Rahn Foundation, named after his late mother, who was a child psychologist. The foundation will address inequalities in mental health care for disenfranchised populations in the United States. Details of the foundation and its plans will be forthcoming. So, my first thoughts upon reading this explanation for why he offloaded 38% of his shares are, okay, if it's going to a foundation, if it's going to help people, then that's all great. This is perhaps a good thing. But then when you look at the language, you see that it says a quote-unquote portion of the sales is going to be going towards this foundation. So my immediate first question is, what is a portion? Are we talking 90%? Or are we talking 1%? Obviously, my thoughts and opinions on this sale would be much different if he's putting 20 out of that $25 million into this foundation to go help people than if he was putting $50,000 of this $25 million into helping people. So you can see how there is a wide scale of range for interpretation that could vary depending on how much of this money is the portion that is going towards it. So if it is towards the lower end of that, especially if it is less than $1 million, this may just seem like deflection to me. Even bringing up this foundation, if it is on the lower end, and to be clear, we have no idea, we have no other information at the time of recording other than this release that his spokesperson gave. But if it is a very small amount, then even bringing it up as a rationale for why he sold $25 million would seem like a deflection to me. Also important to note before we get into any of my speculations on it and my thoughts on this isn't the first time this year in 2021 that JR Rahn has sold a good stake of his position in MindMed. So early in the year, he actually sold, I think, around 25% of his stake, which brings the total amount that he has dumped since the beginning of 2021 up to 47.5%. So the CEO of the company, of Mind Medicine, has sold almost half of his stake in the company since the beginning of the year in 2021. Now, as I was writing this script, or rather kind of putting notes down on the paper, one of the main limiting factors for why this probably isn't that big of a deal was the fact that no other insiders were selling their stock. So I was really leaning towards this wasn't that big of a deal until on Friday, which is part of the reason this video got pushed back a little bit. The news came out that Bruce Linton also sold about half of his total portfolio, or 48% of his stake in the company, rather. And he is, of course, an early investor and sitting board member. So two major shareholders, two members of the board, are selling almost half of their stake in 2021. So what should we be doing? Us small-scale retail investors. We're looking at the big boys here selling half of their stake. Should we be following their lead? Should we be panicking? Should we be doubling down and maybe buying the dip? Well, that's what we're going to get to here, my thoughts on this. And just to let you guys know, everything that I'm about to say is more or less just speculation. We don't have any extra information other than what we have already provided you. This statement from JR Rahn and the raw numbers of how much they sold. So any kind of guesses on the reasoning behind why they sold this is just purely speculation on my part. And also, before I begin into my thoughts, I just also want to say that my thoughts here aren't necessarily complete. I'm still trying to work through my own thought process here to figure out how I feel about it, looking for new information, new research. So oftentimes in the next, 5-10 minutes, I might say some contradictory things, and that's just because right now I'm not sure how I feel about it. I wish I could have a crystal ball. I wish I could have 100% confidence in every little thing that happens, but unfortunately, I'm just like you guys. I'm looking at this information. I'm trying to figure out how I feel about it. So, having said all that, my general thoughts on this are negative. Frankly, when you see two major people, including the CEO of the company, selling almost half of their stake, that doesn't inspire confidence, guys. We're going to get into why it might not necessarily be a bad thing in a moment, but just right now, when you see the CEO selling half of his stake in a company you're holding, that can inspire a little bit of fear. So even if there was no negative reason behind this, I kind of wish these people have taken that more into account, the reaction that people like us, small-scale retail investors, would have to them selling such a large portion of their stake. On top of that, JR Rahn already received a compensation for 2020 of $1.6 million. Early in the year, he sold like 25% of the company or something. So he already has taken out quite a bit of money from the company. It just rubs me the wrong way a little bit seeing this happening a second time. So look, guys, the first time he sold this year, earlier in the year, he said it was to secure the future of the family. He said that he was basically paying for MindMed on the credit card. He had run up massive debts along the process. And you know what? I bought into that line of thinking. It made sense to me. He is an individual like any of us, and he was faced with a position where he had to secure the future, the financial security of his family. And if you go back and watch the videos that I said at the time, I more or less supported that. I thought it was a good move. Now, the second time that he does this in a few months, selling another $25 million, I'm less supportive of this. And yes, it might go towards the foundation. And you know what? If 20 million of this goes towards the foundation, then fine. I'll take back what I said. But if most of this money is just going to his bank account, essentially, it does give me a general negative feeling. However, having said all that, we have to remember that these people are, well, people. They're individuals with their own thoughts, feelings, and financial needs, and we need to be able to put ourselves in their shoes to understand their financial decision-making processes. So, if I was the CEO of a company that all of a sudden, very quickly, within a few months or a year, was worth $1 billion, and now your net worth was whatever it was, north of $60 million or something like that, maybe I would want to try to sell half too and diversify my risk. Because yes, these people are leading the company, but they're also invested in the company. And from your own personal standpoint, it's not good to have your entire net worth tied up in a clinical stage biopharma company. It's just not a smart decision. So I could understand the impetus there if I were in these people's shoes to maybe want to diversify my own personal risk a little bit and sell some. I'd like to think that if I woke up tomorrow and this channel, the Psychedelic Investor, was randomly worth $60 million, I would probably sell half. If I was being completely honest, yes, I would still believe in the future of the channel. Yes, I would still want it to grow. But in the case that it doesn't, it would make sense to sell half now, diversify, get into other things, secure myself financially for the rest of my life. So all I'm saying here is that, yes, from the outside looking in, it does look very negative that these people are selling their stocks, especially JR, CEO of the company. But this doesn't necessarily have to mean that there are negative reasons for the company for why he sold this. And actually, on that topic, as I was going through Reddit and Facebook, I've been seeing lots of people talking about how they're dumping the stock probably because they know that bad news is coming soon. So, for example, they may know that they have bad news of a clinical trial that they're going to release in a few months that didn't go well, so they're selling their stock now. Everybody panic! Except, this would be completely illegal. This would be a textbook case of insider trading, If they were selling based on the belief that the stock was going to take a turn for the negative, then there could be serious consequences for these people, including major financial fines or perhaps even jail time. Now, having said all that, perhaps it would be hard to prove that they did this because they saw negative futures, and also maybe they have just a general negative feeling of how the company is going to be doing going forward, and there isn't necessarily one event or two events that's making them want to sell their stocks, and they just have a general feeling that they should offload some now, and that wouldn't necessarily be illegal. So that's also a possibility. The two kind of options that I see for why these people are selling their stocks, just to kind of crystallize my own personal thoughts on this, is there are two options. One is more positive towards these people, and that is just they're diversifying their own financial holdings. They need to be safe with their own financial investments, even if they are the CEO of the company. And honestly, that's reasonable. That's fair. But then the other possibility is they don't think that the stock is going to remain at where it is and continue to grow, at least in the near term, and they're dumping some shares now so that they can lock in these profits, and that is obviously not a great positive spin on it. And again, I don't know which one of these two it is. I have no more information than you guys. That just seems to be the two only real options available for us here. Now, having said all that, what are my own personal thoughts on my investment into MindMed? And what do I think that people that have large shares or large stakes in MindMed should be doing? Though, of course, none of this is financial advice. So, personally, I hold about $20,000 worth of MindMed at the moment, which makes up about a little more than 15% of my total net worth. And it is almost the entirety of my psychedelic medicines portfolio. I also hold a little bit of Compass Pathways at the moment, but insignificant when compared to my MindMed holdings. Now, I am invested in MindMed, not based off of JR. I didn't even know who JR was when I first found out of MindMed. Not based off Bruce Linton. I did know who he was, but I didn't know he was part of the company when I first got interested in MindMed. I am invested in MindMed based on the potential for the science, for the potential for substances like LSD and 18-MC and MDMA to cure things like ADHD, PTSD, depression, anxiety, whatever, what have you. And none of that has changed. MindMed is still the number one company when it comes to number of clinical trials, the number one company when it comes to the amount of pure science that the company is doing, and none of that has changed. And I am personally, before I make any sort of decision on MindMed, waiting for the results of these clinical trials to come out. I am still a very large bull when it comes to the potential for MindMed long term, over the next 4, 5, 7 years. I am a really big bull. Now, having said that, I have actually been considering for a good amount of time now, a few months now, to perhaps sell a significant stake of my MindMed. And that's not because I think MindMed is a bad decision. It's because I personally am trying to be responsible with my money. Like I said, almost the entirety of my psychedelic medicines portfolio is tied up in MindMed right now. And I don't want to grow the size of my psychedelic medicines portfolio any larger than it is right now, because it's already larger than 15% of my total portfolio. And I don't want to grow my psychedelics portfolio too much larger because I don't want to expose myself to too much risk. So I have been thinking for a while to sell about half of my MindMed, keep 10,000 in MindMed, and then spread 10,000 other dollars to other companies in the field. So definitely the Atai IPO whenever that happens. Whenever the Advisor Shares ETF, PSIL, goes live, I want to invest in that. Maybe also some Field Trip, I haven't made up my mind there. And maybe some DMT companies like either Entheon or Small Pharma. Again, haven't made up my mind there. But generally, what I've been thinking over the past few months, before any of this news broke, is I want to lock in some of my MindMed profits and spread it around to the rest of the psychedelic medicines field, just to be safe with my own money. And that's not a dig against MindMed. That's not saying that I have lost any faith in the company. It's just based on where I am personally, financially, based on my own personal scenario. I'm not saying anybody else should be selling MindMed. All I'm saying is you should be responsible with your money. And what I'm seeing here with two major insiders dumping 50% of their stock is just kind of pushing me towards this idea more and more. I haven't made any decisions. I'll let you guys know when I do make a decision. But it's really pushing me further towards the idea of perhaps I should sell half of my stake, spread around my risk within the psychedelic medicines world, even though my long-term bullishness on MindMed has not decreased at all. Also, we need to talk about how MindMed is very, very volatile as a stock, and we have no idea what the short term is going to bring. In the next 2, 3, 4 years, it's possible that we could see the stock at $8 and we'll all be partying and I'll be kicking myself in the pants for ever selling any. But it's also possible it could dip down to $1, $2 if we just don't see any news, if these clinical trials take years and years and years. That doesn't mean in 7 years the stock still won't be high as they're treating depression, as they're treating anxiety, ADHD, pain, what have you. But in the interim, in this many year-long process of doing this science, realistically the stock could drop, which is why I'm a long-term investor. I am invested for the long term and not the short term. Now, getting back to the story at hand here, and again guys, sorry that my thoughts are all over the place right now, but that's generally how I feel about this. I don't know how to think about this, so my thoughts are all over the place, so this episode is all over the place. But getting back to the selling of these stocks, the optics are really bad, and we just can't get around that. We don't know the reason behind the sale, if it has any negative implications for the long-term performance of MindMed, or if it's just people being financially responsible. So all we can do is speculate on it. And unfortunately, speculation can be dangerous, and it can often lead us towards paths that aren't the most proper to take. So I just want to make sure that we're all being, again, responsible. And again, I can't be a financial advisor. I'm not giving financial advice, but the one thing I will say to people is be responsible with your money. I've said it before, and I'll say it again. I'm a mega bull in MindMed, but I wouldn't have 100% of my portfolio in MindMed. So if you have 100% of your portfolio in MindMed and you're seeing these executives trimming their position by 50%, I would perhaps, not financial advice, follow their lead just because you want to be responsible. But yeah, getting back to the stock insider, the insiders dumping their stocks, this isn't always a bad thing, especially when it comes to biotechnology companies. We see this quite often, and it's just people locking in their own financial stability as the company progresses. For example, anybody that paid any attention to the race for a vaccine that has happened over the past couple years, that maybe invested in Moderna or Pfizer, will remember that these companies, the executives in these companies, all along the process were selling stocks as the stock price was rising. And there was lots of chitter chatter about how, oh no, the executives are selling their stocks in phase 2 clinical trials. They haven't even made it to phase 3 yet. This must mean the vaccine doesn't work. Time to sell my shares. And of course that turned out to be completely wrong. These vaccines turned out to be very efficacious, and the companies are doing very well now, and these executives sold their stock irregardless of that. And we could be seeing something very similar here. The long-term health of MindMed could still be positive, probably still is, in my own personal opinion, probably is. And these are just individuals that, as the stock price is rising, are securing their own financial stability. Although we don't know. Again, I don't want to sugarcoat this. There is a very real possibility that they are starting to have negative general feelings on MindMed, and that's why they sold. We don't know. And I wish we did know. I wish I could come on to this episode and be like, all right, boys and girls, here's the inside scoop, exactly why they sold. I know everything, and I am amazing. But unfortunately, I just can't do that for you guys. I'm at just as much of a loss as you are. So I hope in this episode, my general ramblings going all over the place helped somewhat you guys structure your own thoughts, try to figure out what's going on here. I hope that it will hopefully encourage people to be responsible with their money, not to make huge, essentially gambling decisions. And I hope that going forward, we can all be super aware of what's happening in the MindMed world. Because again, I want to be clear, A, I haven't decided to sell any shares yet. I'll let you guys know if I do. And B, what has happened here with the executives selling their shares hasn't dented my long-term bull thesis of MindMed at all. However, just need to be responsible with my money. Okay, I'm just rambling now, guys. So I think I'm going to cut off the episode here. Thank you all so much for watching. Please remember to like and subscribe if you did enjoy the episode. And leave me a comment down below what you make of these executives selling their money. Are you panicking? Do you think this is just terrible optics but doesn't really affect the business? I want to know your opinions. Like I said, I still don't know what I'm thinking. So if I can read what you guys are thinking, then that will help me a lot. And as I kind of crystallize these thoughts, as I get my thoughts into more as I understand my own thoughts more, I will let you guys know as well. So thank you guys again so much. I'll talk to you again soon, and peace, guys. I love you all.